All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. We'll just wait a few minutes for everyone to start filtering in and listen to some tunes while we're waiting. Sneha, are you familiar with Michael Franti at all?
No, I'm not.
He's he's like a really. We saw him in concert a few weeks ago, and you can probably hear he just has like some really like good feel good vibes, some feel good music, and like everyone at the concert was just so happy. It was like a really good message. He has like a retreat in Bali where like they do like all this positive. So he's like that type of a
Oh,
artist.
wow.
Yeah, yeah. Who are you listening to anybody in particular right now, or do you have like a favorite artist?
I don't really have a favorite artist. I listen to a mix. Um, but my go-to is music that's more peppy, that's got a beat, you
Yeah,
can dance to.
I feel that. I feel that. My wife and I first started dating. We would like go exercise together and stuff, and like it would be I would be listening to my stuff and she'd be listening to her stuff, and like at some point I realized that she was listening to like slow jams
Mm,
exercising, and I was like, how do you like? I was like more of a pump up guy, but whatever works.
yeah.
Slow jams while exercising. You know, what can you say? All right, for those that are just joining, we're gonna wait a few more minutes to get started. We're gonna be talking about keys to high performing agents based on data, based on hundreds of thousands of conversations that we've analyzed. So this is gonna be a good one. Uh, Interesting thing about the Michael Franti concert that I went to. So um, during our wedding, I sang this song actually to my wife, like surprised her. And I hate singing in front of people.
Okay.
So we met Michael Franti before the concert, and and we told him the story, and he was like, "Oh, that's cool." And then during the performance, when he started to sing the song, he actually pulled me up,
Oh,
my wife, in front of like 5,000 people. And it was the most terrifying, but like really fun thing. The thing is,
yeah.
it's like 8 years, so I didn't remember any of it.
Sounds like an experience.
it
Yeah,
yeah.
I can imagine the terrifying experience of being on stage and just getting pulled to sing. Yeah.
Are you a singer? Are you like a karaoke person?
Oh no, I can't sing. Yeah,
Everybody.
I can't sing. I'm terrible. I'm a bathroom singer.
You're bad. That's the most important thing. Awesome. So we're about 3 minutes in. We're gonna get started. I will turn off Michael Franti here, and we'll get going. So, alrighty. Thanks again to everyone who's joining. Very excited for this session. For those of you who have been following along, we've been doing these LinkedIn lives with industry analysts and influencers and experts about once a month now. So hopefully we have some repeat attendees. And if you're new to the stream, then welcome, and we're excited to have you. Stay tuned for more of these. We're going to be doing a lot more as we continue to provide education and insight to the contact center industry. So for those who don't know me, I'm Michael. I am head of content at Observe.AI, and I'm super excited to be joined today by Sneha Iyer, data analyst at Observe. And Sneha, thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, and thank you for having this session with me. Really excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, we've been waiting for this one because we've been doing so much work behind the scenes on our Observe.AI Insights series, where we're analyzing hundreds of thousands of contact center conversations. And when I say we, I really mean Sneha, because she is the wizard behind all this stuff. And so, that series of content is the goal is to pull out these valuable data-backed like nuggets of wisdom to help contact centers operate better. Again, everything is based on large swaths of data. So lots of really great insights, and we'll be reviewing some of our findings today during this session. But first, Sneha, I wanted to just give you some time to share. What do you do? What's your role, and tell us a little about your background.
Yeah, so a bit about my role, what I do at Observe. So I'm a data analyst here, and my role is highly cross-functional. And honestly, I'm really glad that it is that way. So a part of my role includes leading the reporting and analytics for our customers, which includes training them, build dashboards, reports, by leveraging the data on our platform. And for the other part, it includes, analyzing conversational data, surfacing insights to fuel their strategic, operations and growth. Now, I also build ROI models and frameworks where all the insights that we put together eventually get plugged into to help customers realize the value of their investment with Observe. So, if I were to sum up what I do at Observe, I help drive business value.
That's awesome. And that's so important these days, especially with the economy the way it is, and everybody is making sure that they're seeing value in all of their initiatives, right? So, so grateful to have you on the team. So grateful to have you here. Also, just for those who are wondering, the session will be recorded. And if you have questions, please add them into the chat. We will try to answer as many as we can as we go. So, okay, we're going to talk about keys to high-performing agents based on the analyses that Sneha has done. And, as you mentioned, right, a big part of your role is helping our customers better understand what's actually happening on the front lines of their business, providing those data-backed insights. You mentioned, obviously, providing that business value. But just curious in general, why do we do this? Why is this so important for customers to go through this exercise? Talk us through a little bit about that.
Yeah, this is a great question. And let's take a step back. Let's try to see what are different use cases that contact centers try to solve for and what's happening in contact centers. And then it'll become more evident as to why this type of analysis is important, right? So, contact centers can serve different use cases. You could have a sales use case where that would translate into higher conversion rates. It could be a customer service or customer support use case, which would mean monitoring CSAT. So, with different use cases, what's really happening in contact centers is, you have conversations taking place between these contact center representatives and customers. Now, just like any other business, contact centers also have KPIs that they want to track. And with millions of conversations happening every day, it becomes challenging to surface insights on what's working well, what are some opportunities for improvement. So to assess the true north of, the operational efficiency for a contact center, it becomes really important that they start leveraging insights from across the conversational database. And that's why this is important.
Now, you mentioned KPIs, which I think is interesting because everybody always wants to know, what are the most common KPIs? What are the KPIs that people are looking at now? Based on what you have seen with our customers across all of these different industries, what are some of the most common KPIs that they're asking about?
Yeah, some of the top KPIs that come to mind, and mind you, this is not an exhaustive list. There are way too many KPIs, but just to give you a glimpse into some metrics that are getting monitored, the first one is handle time. And why that's important is, it directly relates to the operational efficiency of a contact center. There is a cost associated with each call, and one of the goals for most contact centers is to lower handle times. Now, you also have other KPIs like first call resolution. Now, this again is really important because it impacts your customer experience, customer satisfaction. Contact centers want to ensure that there is a resolution provided in the first call, and they're avoiding those repeat calls. And this is indirectly going to impact your retention. So FCR is another metric everyone's trying to monitor. A few other KPIs would be CSAT, you could be NPS scores. You could also have operational efficiency KPIs, and that would relate to QA productivity, that would relate to onboarding efficiency gains, or just agent productivity gains. So, top of mind, these are some KPIs that contact centers are trying to track more now.
Yeah, an FCR, first call resolution, that's super important because if a customer has to call back repeatedly, that's a poor customer experience, right? So anything that
Yeah.
we can do to help that agent nail it on the first call, finish it up is the way to go.
Yeah, ideally, any customer, when they're calling in to call about a specific issue, they would want that issue to get resolved in that call. It's just, everyone wants to avoid the hassle of either waiting for a call back or having to call back again. So, yeah, first call resolution is definitely really important for providing the good customer experience.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. In terms of how contact center leaders are thinking about KPIs now with the economy the way it is, inflation, just all this uncertainty, have you seen, again, across all the information and all the data that you're looking at, has there been any change to which KPIs are being prioritized differently? Has there been any change now versus, a few years ago?
That's a good question. So, I would say a lot of these KPIs have always existed. So, from a change perspective, I don't think it's too drastic in what they're trying to monitor.
Hmm.
But what I have noticed is the frequency with which customers want to leverage insights to drive these KPIs, that's becoming more relevant.
Interesting. So more, these are becoming more of a topic of discussion, maybe because they're having to prove value, having to show their progress, performance type of thing, prove value in a tough economy, possibly.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Super interesting. Um, the next question, right? When we're talking about KPIs and in terms of visibility, right? Like these KPIs have been around for a while. Folks have been trying to do the types of analyses that you are currently doing. Um, but I think obviously having certain tools and having the capabilities that you have, right, allows them to kind of dig a little bit deeper. But curious, like when we come in and we start to work with customers and contact center leaders, like how are they doing these analyses before we come in and help? What are some ways that they're working through to get these insights themselves?
Yeah, so this is a tricky question, but I have a mixed response. So I would say some contact centers do have the resources, the staffing, and robust data teams to support them to surface these level of insights to drive growth. But if you just take a step back and look at the generic trends in the contact center, you'll see that most contact centers still adhere to traditional industry norms. And what that really means is, they are sampling one or two calls per agent. The cadence of sampling these calls could vary, but they're looking at a very small subset of calls across the entire conversational database that exists. And once they sample these calls, what they try to do is understand what are some call behaviors, what are some specific outcomes, and all of this to close the loop. It feeds into the agent performance management workflow, right? So currently, most contact centers are analyzing less than 2% of their calls, and they're using those insights to make strategic investments. But what they're lacking is the ability to have that holistic picture of the insights that can be surfaced across 100% of the calls. So that gives them more confidence to drive those strategic investments.
Yeah, that's so interesting. In one of our recent reports, it was, I think, how to build a resilient contact center. It was around economic uncertainty. We can share the link a little bit later, but we found that like the vast majority, 99% of respondents, all of whom were contact leaders, said that they saw value and they used contact center customer conversation insights to drive business decisions. So this was obviously they saw the value in the insights that were in them, but far fewer respondents actually felt like they had satisfactory visibility into those. So you had, I think it was like 75% of business leaders making these important business decisions off of not enough visibility. So you talk about having that holistic picture, like tell me a little bit about like why that matters and about the confidence and how that helps to kind of inform better decision making.
Yeah, let's take an example, right? So we're talking about agent performance. Now, say you have an agent taking maybe 100 calls, and you have a team of experts, randomly sampling, say, 5 calls out of the 100 calls for that agent. Now, in that 5 calls, maybe the agent's performance is just average, or it tends to incline towards, the poor side. Do you think those 5 calls are reflective of what the agent's true capability is? What about the 95% of the calls that exist? Maybe the agent was creative in providing solutions to customers in 80 of those calls. Maybe the agent like had great objection handling capabilities in other calls. So what's happening in those calls is completely not visible to you. And so if you're going to measure an agent just based on those 5 calls, you're not giving them fair feedback. And sometimes a lot of contact centers, they do structure agent compensations based on sampling these calls. So we want to make sure that we're able to drive a fair agent performance feedback mechanism as well, and that's why this really matters.
Yeah, and the context really matters. There's an interesting question here from Brad, that he's asking, right, with the ability to automate maybe some of the easier or quicker conversations that an agent might have, um, contact center efficiency might improve, but now the agents may be left with more difficult and complex conversations, which means AHT might go up. How do we think about that, and how do we talk to our contact center leaders about that from a context perspective, right? Because AHT length may not be a binary good bad thing. It has to do with context. So, what's our perspective there?
Yeah, so again, AHT depends on the use case. Now, there could be, use cases like maybe a sales call where, it really doesn't matter if your handle time is high, because at the end of the day, what matters is whether you're able to drive that conversion or not. So finding the right balance between, which metric is more important, that's key. And I completely agree with the fact that, a lot of simpler tasks can be automated, which, shifts the focus for the agent to just focus on more complex calls. But that's where coaching effectiveness comes into play, right? So when you have insights across all these conversations, all the coaching opportunities that exist. And if you incorporate a coaching program into the agent performance management, that way you can hold the agents accountable to some of the metrics that the customers are trying to track.
That's great. And I think it'll be interesting when we get into the actual findings from your analyses, how that plays a part into actually determining which KPIs you should be focusing on, and how to target your coaching. And speaking of those types of questions, what are some of the top questions that contact center leaders want you to answer when you're looking through your analyses of all of their data? What are the most common ones that come up?
Well, some of the most recurring questions that we get asked by contact center leaders is what's working well for top performers, and how can we use those strategies to improve the performance across the rest of the agent cohort, right? So it could be average performers, it could be bottom performers. How can we move the needle, push them to the right side of the bell curve? And the question really contact center leaders ask us is, tell me what I don't know. Now, when I say this, what I mean is contact center leaders, they come in with a lot of expertise. They have certain hypotheses based on their experiences, which they wish to validate. But when they only have so much visibility, it becomes challenging to validate that hypothesis, right? Let's take an example. So maybe you have a customer whose top KPI is customer satisfaction. Now, that's your outcome, call outcome. This can be measured in different ways. So you can have different levels of responses, like customers highly satisfied, customers not satisfied at all. Now, what contact center leaders want to know is what are the call behaviors that are driving these outcomes? Now, call behaviors could be at an agent level, they could be at a customer level. And again, some examples of call behaviors could be, did the agent provide a resolution to the customer? Was the agent able to handle specific objections properly? Or did the agent comply to certain scripts? From a customer level, it could be, was the sentiment of the customer same throughout the call? Was there a shift on that sentiment at the beginning of the call and then, towards the end of the call? Or was a new concern from the customer surfaced that the contact center has never looked at before? So, just the ability to map these call behaviors to specific outcomes is what contact center leaders really want to know. Because at the end of the day, they're all trying to improve the customer experience. And being able to understand what drives a specific outcome will help them, incorporate those coaching programs in place.
Right. Yeah. It's all about the taking the insights, the learnings, again, backed by data, not just from a small subset of like 5% of calls or 2% of calls, but at scale, and then being able to take those insights and then put them into action. So
Yeah.
that's a good segue into some of the analyses that we have here. So you did this analysis based on 225,000 conversations around what was the difference between top performing agents and bottom performing agents. And you'll see here, just to explain these three charts, there are the top performers are on the left with the striped bar chart, and then the bottom performers were on the right with the solid purple. You found three like discrepancies between how top agents performed and how bottom agents performed, and these were based off of sales closed, right? So this is a a sales focused contact center that we're looking at, right?
Yeah.
So why don't you walk us through a few of these and just, is there anything surprising here, right? I think the first one is just that like the top agents were more likely to use advocacy language, provides more support, saying phrases like, "Yeah, I got you on this. We'll be right back in a second." Reassurance was very similar, but again, 37% of top performers were more likely to use that reassurance phrasing than bottom performers. And then this one I thought was really interesting, which is top agents were 3 times more likely to actually use language around like approximations and estimation. So it wasn't about necessarily feeling super confident when asked about a question. It wasn't like this is the amount or so. It was more like I think it's this, or it's about that, or it's approximately. And that's sort of like, I don't know, that feeling of like, let me figure it out for you, tended to build some rapport between the customer and the agent. So these are super interesting findings. I think they're really helpful in terms of coaching, like you said. But Sneha, like, is there anything that was surprising to you? Anything that stood out for you in your analysis here?
Yeah, so I don't think I was very surprised with the results that I found because I personally felt this is intuitive. More so because you would expect contact center agents to have a more customer first mentality. So you would want most agents to proactively engage with customers and make them feel like they're well taken care of. But there does come in an element of surprise when you present this to the customers, right? Now, what really drives that element of surprise for customers is they too expect their agents to have that customer first mentality, but the question that they start asking is, hey, what are the roadblocks that are preventing these bottom performers or average performers from having the same level of efficiency as top performers? Like, are they handling too many calls? Are they handling a different type of call altogether? Or it could just be, have they trained their agents to handle all types of objections that exist? So it could be different questions, right? So contact center leaders, they keep questioning, like, what's the why behind it? And when you're able to find the answer to that why, you can start understanding, like, how you can start to leverage the data to drive more power. But from this analysis, I think the most interesting was the third one, and that's around, like, using estimations, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Sometimes you might expect agents to be so well versed that they know everything, but sometimes honesty is key. If you don't know, it's okay. You don't know. You're not saying a number and setting the customer up for failure. You can just say that, hey, like, this is, I think it probably runs up to this amount, or, this is the figure that the deal would land at, but let me take a look at this for you. Right. So you are not setting the customer up for failure. You're still taking your time to get all the right information together. And that, in a way, is customer first mentality. Like, you don't want to provide the customer with the wrong information. So I think that definitely was interesting from this.
Yeah, and to me, it feels almost counterintuitive because I always feel like you would want your agents to be confident and be direct and know exactly, know all the answers all the time, which obviously is not possible. But phrasing it in a way like, "Hey, let me go check this out for you. I'm on your side," type of a thing, uh, tends to really help. The other thing that I thought was interesting is like none of these seem like they're too hard to actually implement, right?
Yeah.
It seemed like they're fairly straightforward with some level of coaching. It's not that the top agents have some sort of like secret magic dust or something that they're using. It is just a little bit of training and muscle memory, maybe. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would. I would agree that just a little bit of training can go a long way here. And these don't even have to be like part of specific scripts. It's just as simple as saying, hey, like, I'm here for you, and be rest assured that we'll have this problem taken care of. So just saying those words, just providing that reassurance, it adds a sense of comfort, a sense of relief that, hey, my voice is heard. I know my problem's going to be taken care of today. And that impacts customer experience.
Yeah. And the other interesting thing that I think you mentioned before, it's not just about the data, because the data may not be necessarily the most surprising, but now they know where to focus, right? Like the
Yeah.
coaching, right? There's a million things that a contact center operations team can focus on, a coaching team can focus on. But with this visibility, they're now able to say, okay, we know the three things that move the needle the most. Let's work on these where the discrepancies are.
Yeah.
So trying to do everything.
Correct.
Cool. The full report on this one is also on our blog. We'll share the link out as well. But it goes further in depth and has all the different sort of phrases that are used, or examples of phrases that are used in these instances. So definitely go check that out. We had another one that I thought was also really interesting. Again, going back to KPIs, right? We did some analysis on what drives CSAT. And would love for you to kind of tell us about this one, just because I know it's a little bit small. I'll explain for the audience here. The one on the left shows the trajectory of CSAT based off of the amount of personalization in a call, and the one on the right is CSAT showing same thing, but on the negative side. So, Sneha, I'll let you explain it better than I ever could.
Yeah. So this slide, this visual is just, telling you that when you have more personalization in conversations, it tends to drive higher satisfaction. And again, like we mentioned before, it seems intuitive that agents would personalize calls. And again, to go back to my point about, hey, like, when I do have personalization on calls, I feel a sense of comfort. I feel a sense of relief. I know my voice is heard, and I know I'm going to be taken care of. So, no surprises in seeing this result. But yeah, just, this is something to keep in mind that, things as small as personalization could really matter. Like from personal experience, let's just take maybe like some delivery app, and maybe you're in a situation where your order is delayed, or it got misplaced, or it said it was delivered but nowhere to be found. Now your first step of resolution usually is with a chatbot. Now you're going to have a set of scenarios there where you choose, and sometimes the resolution is very straightforward, like the chatbot will help you get to that resolution in a few seconds. But there might be a situation where you need to provide more context, and you ask for further agent assistance. And then the minute the chat transfers to the agent, you provide some more context, and the agent steps in to tell you that, hey, we understand your situation, and this is not the kind of experience we wish for you to have. So let me take a look at what I can do to solve this as quickly as possible for you. Those words are golden. Like the minute I hear those words, I know that I'm going to have a resolution. I know that my problem is going to be solved. So I feel good about it. It gives me a good customer experience. So that agent personalization touch always makes a lot of difference.
Yeah, that's so good. And there's nothing worse than not being able to find a food delivery when you're really hungry and you're angry. But it goes back to the previous findings as well, right? Around like reassurance and advocacy language, right? All of those things that again we sort of know, but now it's backed by data. And the personalization thing, I think, to me is really interesting, especially in the age of Chat GPT, where we're starting to see a lot of these sort of like generative AI powered scripts that may be sort of like very mundane and very like large scale, just kind of not as personal, right? It really shows that there are some areas that you still need the agent to have the expertise to have the conversation and give that personalized touch, right? Even if they are using GPT powered features or functionality, right? It's still being able to like use that knowledge to provide a great experience. And when you do that, again, this is over a sample size of 65,000 conversations. The data is pretty clear, right? Like personalization does lead to higher CSAT.
Yeah.
So kind of curious, right? Like we have this data, we are, you've been sharing this with customers. Um, how do they then implement it? What are some ways that you have seen work in terms of, okay, taking the data now into action and making sure that it's absorbed and used by agents?
Yeah, so one of the things that we recommend customers to do based on, supplying this data is to do a split testing, right? So you establish a hypothesis that, hey, these are specific, call behaviors that drive specific outcomes. Now, how do you validate if it's actually going to have an impact or not? So you have two groups, one group which is trained on the recommendations you provide them, and another group which remains as is, no change to their coaching plans or anything else. And then you try to monitor these trends over time, and then you see if the delta increases, or if there is a gap in the performance between the agents that were coached based on those strategies and the agents that were left uncoached. Now when you're able to see that difference, that's when you know for a fact that, hey, like, these recommendations are actually driving improvements. So it makes sense for us to leverage this across the board.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And I like that it's a process, right? It's not like, okay, we have this data and I'm just full scale go. There are steps to this to make sure that you are putting safeguards up and not doing something that may adversely affect it. You're taking a more scientific approach,
Yeah.
which I appreciate. In terms of actual like coaching tactics, anything that you're seeing customers doing that works, again, to take these insights into actually action, or is it more so just, hey, the fact that you have this data kind of makes everything a little bit more objective, kind of removes the bias from it? What are your observations there?
Yeah, I completely agree with what you just mentioned around, when you have so much data, it's more objective than subjective, and it eliminates, the bias that comes in where in the feedback process. So we've seen some of our customers be most successful when they leverage all the insights, and understand what are all the coaching opportunities that exist, right? So we talked about how the traditional industry norms is, evaluating about 2 to 3% of the total conversations that exist. And these coaching, opportunities are nothing but numbers, data that's coming from those calls that are sampled. Now, when you're sampling only 2 to 3% of calls, you don't really know if you are tapping into all the coaching opportunities that are relevant for you. But when you have all the information that you need to look at, so it surfaces all the opportunities that exist and where you can improve on. So when you look at it from that holistic scale, customers tend to be more successful because they're able to share this information at an agent level. They're able to tell them that, hey, this is where you stand in terms of your own performance growth, and if you were to compare it against the rest of the agent cohort, this is where you are. And the agents also feel more confident because they know that the feedback is provided based on all the calls that they've handled. It's just not one or two calls for them to dispute saying, hey, I do not agree with you. When you have data to back it up, it incentivizes the agents to perform better.
That's so good. Okay, I know we're over by a few minutes. We do have a few questions that we're going to try to get to, but just to let everyone know, the last two bits, I think they're being posted in the links are being posted in the chat here. But we do have the first two of the Observe.AI Insights already live. These ones talk about the top performing agents versus bottom performing agents, then also personalization. We have a third one coming out this week. This is all around how QA volume affects or impacts agent performance. So this one's super interesting. Sneha, do you want to tease out a little bit about like what that is and what people can expect from that piece?
Yeah. Yeah. So really excited for the third insights blog to be out. And it's pretty much a culmination of everything that we discussed today. And it emphasizes the need for, having a larger sample set, right? So it boils down to two things. It helps increase the level of confidence with which you can make decisions, and it also helps reduce your error margins. Now these error margins can translate into different costs incurred for different industries, different use cases. But at the end of the day, when you feel like you have information across your entire database, you can confidently invest strategically into achieving the KPI, the goals that you've set for yourself. So this blog is going to be talking about how increasing that sample size can help you achieve, or assess the true north for your contact center.
So good. I can't wait for that one. Stay tuned. It'll be out shortly. Um, and again, I know we're over. We do have a few questions that came through earlier that I do want to get to. And if anyone out there has any questions for Sneha, feel free to send them in. We'll try to get to as many as possible for as long as we can stay. But the first one that we had come in earlier was, obviously these analyses are super powerful and have a ton of value. How can contact centers get started doing their own kind of analysis?
Yeah. So one methodology that contact centers can start doing is, use the cohort analysis approach. Now, what that means is each contact center will have a different set of metrics to measure their agent performance. But depending on the KPI that matters to them, they can take a list of agents belonging to different cohorts. So it could be top performers, average performers, bottom performers, and the categorization of the cohort can vary. It doesn't necessarily have to be top bottom. It could be a different skill type. It could be a different type of campaign. It could be just based on experience. So you can categorize the cohort the way you like. You take a list of agents, you sample a few of their calls, and then you try to do a gap analysis, right? So after listening to those calls, you try to understand if there is an opportunity delta between different cohorts. If yes, that'll give you a high level overview of, hey, like this is the first step that I need to take to scale this approach across the board. So one of the most recommended, solutions for contact centers to start doing this on their own would be to do a cohort analysis.
I have a feeling that you're going to be getting a bunch of job offers after this. This was a mistake. Never going to let you leave. Okay. And then the other question that we had come in was, right, like you are working with a lot of customers across a lot of different industries. You're working at the leadership level, executive level, a lot of times, based on the data that you've been seeing, based off of the interactions and conversations that you've had with all of these customers. Are you able to see any sort of trends, longer trends in the industry that are becoming more top of mind for folks as we head into the back half of this year?
Yeah, I can give you an example for one industry trend that we've been seeing, and that's around the handle time that I talked about before.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, the question here is why do specific agents or why does the contact center have, a higher handle time? And in order to get to that, you do a root cause analysis. And we've done this for a lot of our customers. And the trend that we've seen is it really boils down to a few elements of what's driving that handle time. So it could be, something as simple as, hey, there's a lot of dead air in these conversations, or there are a lot of hold time violations. So, more dead air, more hold time violations, they're adding probably seconds or minutes, to your call. So that's going to increase your handle time. And to go a step further, you again ask the question, why is there dead air? Why are there, so many hold time violations? And that could reflect, at an agent level, what's happening in those calls. Like, are the agents well equipped to handle these objections? Are they not able to provide the solutions, to specific objections? Is that why there's dead air? Or maybe, they're trying to pull up information, it's taking some time, and that's why there is a dead air. So it could be, so many reasons, but dead air, hold time violations, just understanding objection handling capabilities. These are some trends that we've seen that drive handle times. And this again is not specific, but it is a generic industry trend that we're beginning to notice.
Yeah. Do you feel like handle times are becoming more in focus just because longer handle times equate to more costs, and that is like one of the not easiest, but one of the potentially more straightforward ways of like cutting down on costs and increasing operational efficiency?
Yeah, most definitely. Like with operational efficiency, handle time is something that gets brought up so frequently. But again, I want to be mindful that, depending on the use case, handle times are, the KPIs for some customers. For some, it's, just the conversion rate. It could be something else. But based on what I've seen with, my interactions with customers, this has been brought up the most.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think we got to everything. Sneha, thank you again for being here, for sharing your insights, your knowledge, your analyses. These are fantastic. Thank you to everybody who joined us today. Hopefully you found some value in what we were able to share. If you have questions for either of us, you can reach us on LinkedIn. And we hope to see you again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.